over the years, what we find, sir, is that terrorism mostly is spawned in countries which are dictatorship, authoritarian, military dictatorship, and much less in democratic countries. And yet, the bigger sufferers are the democracies because pluralism, secularism, all those ideals, values that you just now mentioned, those tend to be anathema to these terrorist groups. Even the manner in which we fight terrorism is different. We have to obey the rules of law, quite rightly, human rights, and other things, while the other countries, the military dictatorship, etc., when they have to fight counter-terrorism, when they have to fight terrorism, they don't. Let's also not forget that many of the military dictatorship also tend to use terrorism as an instrument of policy. So under these circumstances, sir, what I would like to know from you is what kind of dialogue is possible between democratic countries which must observe, which do observe all the rules of law, human rights, and other values, and the other countries where there is spawning going on and which sometimes indulge in using terrorism as an instrument of policy and have a totally different way of doing things. So what kind of dialogue and cooperation would you recommend?
Of course, there are not easy answers to such a question because it's a long-term perspective. You have to help the creation of strong institutions in these countries that would allow you to put the basis of a state of law, strong police, strong army, that would respect principles that will help them to be more effective. That's where I believe you have to take into account several elements in the kind of cooperation you are going to develop with such country. The first one is to put the emphasis on economical and social cooperation who are going to show that things can get better and a perspective can be given in such countries. Very often despair, humiliation is a very bad advisor, and some of these countries, failed states or weak states, don't see any perspective. They don't see any future, and this, of course, is not the best way to answer to the most educated part of this population that would only see as a future the use of violence. So I believe strong economical cooperation, strong consensus also of the regional and international community in dealing with such a country. Whether you are talking with failed states like Somalia, whether you are talking of a state which might be more developed or a dictatorship, the capacity of having a regional and international approach, which is going to be supported with a strong consensus, is going to make you much more effective in the messages you are going to send to this country. And the more you are going to be able to create a positive dialogue, the more effective this country is going to be, and this country is going to be able to make progresses. The fact that very often these countries are both dictatorship, but also countries in which it is very difficult for the regime and for the leaders to impose their authority in all the country, might indicate they will need some help in their way to deal with their own domestic problems. That's a very difficult question because very often foreign intervention, foreign cooperation, when it's too strong, we've seen that in Iraq, create rejection, create a sense of occupied forces, and at the end of the day, create more violence against this help and cooperation. That's why the dialogue should be reinforced through the most technical channels, like police, for example, intelligence, in order to test the willingness of this country to cooperate and to help to face the different challenges like terrorism. And I believe in the case of the problem India is facing, whether we are talking about the relationship with Pakistan, strong cooperation through the channel of intelligence, strong cooperation from the different countries who are the most helpful and cooperating with Pakistan, the US and Europe, for example, and strong demands, precise demands, in order to evaluate and force this country in cooperating against this terroring channel. I think these are the key ways to force cooperation and to be sure that this cooperation is going to be more effective. But unfortunately, very often, all the efforts that you are going to make are not going to be enough, because at the end of the day, the situation in the country would still be a dangerous situation. And that's where you will need cooperation with all the other developed countries and all the countries that do have a capacity in the region. And that's where I believe the capacity of India, reinforcing its cooperation with Europe, with the United States, with Russia, with China, with Japan, gives a very strong vision of the different risks. And if you are able to enhance also your cooperation with all the different regional powers, you will not allow these terrorist groups to use the different possibilities, different countries around India that might help them in organizing an attack. So it has to be very realistic, it's very unsatisfactory, but you have to slowly build a network which is going to be more performant, more efficient than the network of the terrorists. You would not allow them to take advantage of the situation in the neighboring countries. You will not allow them to use technologies or to use financial assets if you have the cooperation of all the most important countries in the world who might be able to track their capacities. You need also a very strong cooperation with all the countries, the Muslim countries of the Middle East and all the neighboring regions. So the risk will be more limited. Your capacity of anticipation, your capacity of information will be a lot stronger. There will always be a dark part, always be some element of the vision, of the puzzle, that would not be complete. But with more cooperation, this part is going to narrow. This part is going to be more limited. That's why cooperation on terrorism needs time. It's a long-term perspective, needs a strong analysis of the attitudes and means of the terrorist groups. And it needs also a lot of discretion and quiet cooperation between countries.
Well, I've just been told that we are running out of time because the next speakers, I know you kept your time, this is no reflection on you, and this is a session that we can go. So I'm just going to have one more question, and then I'm going to call it a halt. There's Mr. N.K. Singh had sort of requested for this. It's going to be a brief one. We are completely out of time, apparently.
You know, I think that in your very, very articulate exposition, one of the things which you said was alluded to some linkages between extreme poverty as a breeding ground for terrorism. I wish to ask you, Mr. Villepin, that considering the huge economic meltdown and the millions of people who are losing jobs all over the world with perhaps very bleak future, do you think that you see a symbiotic relationship as Obama gets increasingly distracted in the twin challenges of security and managing also the challenge of an economic meltdown, that the next 2 years will see a larger breeding ground for terrorism and the relationship between restoring economic health to the world as we begin to fight this menace of terrorism all over?
I think you are pointing one of the most difficult questions of today's times. And I think we have to face the fact that the world has missed in the last decade a lot of opportunities. We have also to face the fact that we were wrong as political leaders on many issues. We were wrong in the priorities we've given to ourselves and to our countries in many respects. The idea that development was only trying to increase the consumers' capacity in each of our countries, only increase the GNP, certainly today does not appear as the answer. Speculation and general consumption is not the answer of the problems of the world. And we have to take a different perspective, I believe, with the experience of this financial and economical crisis. We have also to consider that we need different role models, different attitude, different examples in our societies. And this is going to be a very important introspective analysis in order to know what is the best for our countries. Should we believe that the world is going to be in 1 or 2 years back to what it was 2 or 3 years ago? The kind of world we were living in is the kind of world we want to give to our children. And I believe terrorism is going to be, as violence, as war, is going to be one of the strongest reminder of the world we don't want to live in the next years. Yes, we are going to know more terrorism. Yes, we are going to know more violence. Yes, we are going to know more wars in the coming years. It has been always like that. With crisis, we have more violence because we have more injustice. And the key element in any political strategy in all of our countries is to fight against injustice. Yes, the world we've been living in during the last years was an unfair world, was an unjust world. Being able to earn millions just with a snap because you were able to buy some commodities, some oil, and make a lot of money with it is not something normal. And we have to live in a world where work, hard work, discipline, ethic needs to be back. So I believe giving a better sense to our collective goals, giving a better sense to our collective work, being able to found on principles our societies. What we need more than ever is principles. Principles of justice, principles of truth, principles of global common interest, public interest. I think this is absolutely needed, and that's where we need to approach this new era with a lot of humility. All this system of light, glamour, money, consumption, all this should be the past. And if we don't change our lifestyles, if we don't change what are our motivations in government, in business, in how to govern a society, then violence will be stronger, and then these networks that are feeding themselves with humiliation, frustration of the people, and poverty are going to be stronger and stronger. That's why we need to completely change our values. New examples, more dedication towards the people, more ethic in the way we are dealing with the problems of the world. Then we might expect to live in a better world. Thank you.
Thank you.